Good evening and welcome to Information Please, your Peoria Public Library on the air, bringing you information about your library and your community. This evening my guest is Roberta Koshalski, and we're going to tell you about an exciting new exhibit that we've got coming to Peoria Public Library that will tie in with a lot of the other special events we have going on. It's going to be a great time to tie up a lot of information about the Civil Rights Movement and for Black History Month, so we hope you're going to come and see it, and we're going to tell you about it right now. Hi, Roberta.
Hi, Tricia.
Well, this kind of came to us quickly, and we haven't had a lot of time to tell the community about it, but it's called Changing America, the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863, and the March on Washington, 1963. And I'm not sure how many people really put together that those two pivotal events are exactly 100 years apart. And of course, we're at 150 years and 50 years.
Anniversaries, yes.
Have to do my math there.
And I'd like to say that this opportunity and the resulting exhibit is one of the reasons, or one of the ways I drive you crazy.
Yes.
Because
last minute.
The opportunity came up kind of quickly that we could apply for this exhibit through the American Library Association. And there wasn't a long turnaround time from the time we applied to the time that they said that we were one of the selected sites. We found that out last month in December. And then we got the good news that we were to be one of the first sites to host the traveling exhibit.
Which is exciting because nobody's seen this. This is new.
Right, and there are actually 2 duplicate exhibits traveling across the United States for the next few years. And a site in North or South Carolina is also the first to exhibit that exhibit, and then we're getting the other copy of the exhibit coming at the end of January.
Yeah, January 27th.
Basically going to be displayed through the month of February and a few days into March then. So that's great. They selected us to be first, but oh my gosh, that's, it
need
was
to
just
tell
a few
people
weeks
about it.
away from when, and nail down programs and make sure we have a place for it.
Yes.
Because going into it, I knew that applying for this, our art gallery was already booked through 2014. The gallery at the main library has become very popular. We have wonderful exhibits, usually a month at a time, more or less. But it's all booked, so I want to apply for this, but where would we put it? Oh, a few other places, even within the gallery were suggested we can do this if we get it. Then we find, when we get the grant and they send us the specifications, that it's really big. So it's probably, it's on the main library, main floor. So
that's right.
Instead of the gallery where people have to go down to lower level 1 to see any exhibit, this is going to be in your face on the main
You'll have
floor.
to walk through it to get your book that's on the home pickup shelf.
So you'll be close.
But exciting, and I hope people who generally are in a hurry and don't take time to go down to the gallery very often will see this anyway. And what it is it's panels with big pictures, with explanations, and it really ties together these 2 events and the struggle for freedom and civil rights in this country. And so there's interesting, fascinating images, but they'll be on these big curved panels right on the main floor. And of course, main library is open 9 to 6, Monday through Saturday. It's free. You can bring whoever you want and take your time looking at it. But a lot going on. And of course, this ties right in with so many other things we have going on.
Most notably, Peoria Reads. We worked with Bradley University this year. Bradley selected the theme of civil rights past and present for their 2013-2014 academic year. So the Peoria Reads Committee decided to work with them, and we selected the book Warriors Don't Cry by Melba Patillo-Beals as the book to read and discuss in our community.
Which you and I have discussed in depth on this show, and people can certainly go back and watch that video again on our YouTube channel. But if they don't know about it, you want to tell us just very briefly.
Yes, in 1957, 9 Black high school students were chosen to integrate Little Rock High School, Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. And the book was written by Melba Patillo-Beals, who was one of the Little Rock 9, one of the 9 students. And it's her memoir taken from the diary she kept as a junior in high school that year. and it goes through the struggles and what she and the other 8 students endured, the spitting, the lit pieces of paper thrown at her, just the intimidation, the yelling, the screaming, the swearing, the threats, and the few people who did stand up, a teacher, a fellow white student, people who did, were the voice of reason and helped. And so it's a great book. It's also available in abridged edition for middle and high school students too.
For younger,
written by the same author.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And we're going to also have some other things going on. We don't have them completely nailed down yet, but we do have some other speakers.
Yes, we've got
movies and some other programs like that will help people gain an understanding. 50 years is a long time. Many people weren't alive, didn't live through this. You and I did, but many people didn't live through this. You were pretty young, though.
Right. Wasn't born during the Little Rock 9, but shortly after that. But even so, even if you're 5 years, 10 years old, you may or may not remember seeing things on TV, or depending on where you lived across the country.
And what your parents let you watch.
Right.
What your family and friends' opinions were, whether you even had a TV. Not everybody had TV at that point.
And so we are having a film and discussion series through a Created Equal grant opportunity. That's going to be happening through this spring too. We're having scholars come and show 4 films, and I am pretty sure I can name all 4 of them: Slavery by Another Name, The Freedom Riders, The Abolitionists, and The Loving Story. And so we will show the film at one of the library locations and have a local scholar facilitate a discussion with whoever comes to the films.
Yeah, that'll be great.
And then we will have, of course, discussions of Warriors Don't Cry happening throughout the community, book clubs, school classes, etc. will be reading the book. And, the history of civil rights is so long, just looking at this Changing America exhibit between 1863 and 1963 and beyond, that there's a lot of history.
There is. And
the
struggle didn't start in 1863. That was the culmination of many, many years of battling for freedom. And so it's a long history, but it's a fascinating one. Well, we've got a sample of some of what people will see in the exhibit that I think we can show, maybe, if I can hit the right button. There. Okay. This is a portrait.
Yeah, a portrait of a family from around the 1863 time period when the Emancipation Proclamation was put, well, I would say put into effect, but not really. President Lincoln first wrote a preliminary of it, and then the final was ratified, passed by Congress on January 31st, 1865. I believe, and coincidentally, Illinois was the first state to then ratify it the next day, February 1st, 1865. Most of the states that were states in 1865 did ratify it that year, but interestingly, Mississippi was the last state that was a state in 1865. They were the last state to ratify it in 1995.
Wow.
They rejected it in 1865, and finally it was ratified by Mississippi in 1995.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
He's not wearing often the uniform. I get to teach Tricia something.
Yeah, he's wearing the uniform of a federal soldier, so obviously fought for freedom for himself and his family. And
possibly after he was freed, because the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free all the slaves. It freed slaves who were in slavery in the southern states that were not the Union states.
Right.
The Emancipation Proclamation and Lincoln kept the northern states, the Union states, they could keep their slaves because they wanted to keep the northern states loyal to the country, the Union. And so the proclamation basically freed slaves in any states in rebellion against the Union. So, and there was a special incentive then for those freed slaves to join the Union
Army,
armies, which they did.
Right. And that's a whole Black History Month program in itself, which we don't have this time, but maybe we will in the future.
Well, and we typically, not every year, but we do the Juneteenth program many times, you know, not every year, but you know, every few years.
Juneteenth is when Texas, the slaves in Texas heard about the emancipation.
Finally got word.
It was on June 19th,
exactly.
but it took that long for them to hear. Wouldn't happen today in the days of social media, that's
right.
for sure.
A few keystrokes.
Yeah, but we have some more, and this is a lovely illustration
of the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation.
And again, you've got someone who's a soldier and people quite startled and thanking the deity, I guess, there for their freedom. This was later on, 1905, I think.
And I have to go back to my notes to make sure I don't say something totally wrong on this.
I think this is in the South.
Yeah, Emancipation Day, Richmond, Virginia, 1905.
When apparently people were still celebrating. I mean, that was 40 years after,
later.
but it was important enough. I mean, I don't remember ever hearing an Emancipation Day parade or celebration, and what a nice thing to do. And here is members of the South Carolina legislature after the war. This is an interesting piece. It's one of those composite photos, and when we get the display, we'll have lots of explanation about it, I'm sure, along with many of the other things that'll be on there, but fascinating to see the combination of people, the radical members, and they're white and black, and you know, there was a lot of people fighting to make this happen. And then we move on to 100 years later, and people are free, but not really.
The other bookend of the exhibit, the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. 250,000 people participated in this march, which was the largest march on Washington, D.C., and people from Peoria participated.
They did.
You may recall there was a 5-part or more series in the Journal Star last August of 2013, commemorating the 50th anniversary. And there were interviews with people from Peoria who were on a bus or otherwise made it, or you know, were involved in the March on Washington. And you know, I didn't realize when we were putting all of this Peoria Reads together, it's you know, 150 years here, 50 years here, but actually that the March on Washington was planned to coincide with
I didn't
that
realize
anniversary.
that either. That's why we have displays and programs, so we can
learn.
Find this stuff out. Yep.
And we look, you know, I'm always struck by how well dressed people
went to Washington
in the 50s, 60s.
That was before the hippies, I guess.
69.
This picture fascinates me.
Lyndon Johnson, President Lyndon Johnson, signing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You see Martin Luther King Jr. in the background. I don't know if I should be pointing at the screen like that.
You can
but
point.
I just did. Okay. And this was the Civil Rights Act that we no longer had the separate accommodations. People just a little older than me, perhaps, remember the separate drinking fountains, the separate hotels or theaters or swimming pools or whatever.
Swimming pools
and
which all seems incredibly barbaric at this point.
Yeah, well, and it was supposed to be separate but equal, but they weren't. You know, you see the pictures of a drinking fountain for black people, which was just a little bowl with bare pipes running under it, and then there's the
dirty,
the very nice,
dirty. That's what I remember is dirt.
Yeah, and then the nicer, not nice by today's standards, but the nicer whitewater fountain, or the restrooms where, you know, in a department store, the white restrooms would be nearby, the black restrooms would be in the basement or something. And we find that in Warriors Don't Cry, where Melba, when she was little and before she was a high school student, when she and her mom and grandma went to a department store. She had to go to the bathroom. You know, she was a little kid and she was fidgeting, and she knew she couldn't make it all the way down to the basement to the black restroom, so she snuck into the white ladies' restroom and caused quite an uproar.
Yes, yes, which may have been one of the things that influenced her as a teenager to be so determined. I mean, an experience like that could either crush you or empower you, and apparently it empowered her.
Yes, yes. And her mom was a teacher.
Yes.
And so, you know, they were educated. And this is our
a credit line.
Credit line that because we got this grant and exhibit, of course, American Library Association and others want the thanks, the credit for providing this to us, and I'm just going to read it quickly. Changing America, the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863, and the March on Washington, 1963, is presented by the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture and the National Museum of American History in collaboration with the American Library Association Public Programs Office. The tour of the traveling exhibition is made possible by the National Endowment for the Humanities, Exploring the Human Endeavor. And of course, we've gotten other traveling exhibits from the American Library Association and or the National Endowment for the Humanities, so we appreciate their continuing support and them looking highly on Peoria Public Library.
Yes, and not only do we have this exhibit and the Peoria Reads program and the film program, but in June we have another exhibit coming that's Lincoln in the Constitution, which will talk about, you know, his decisions and thinking about the Constitution and other things he did. So that will kind of wrap up this long learning process we have. But it's very pleasurable, lifelong learning process to be able to do it this way with pictures and people talking and things you may have missed in history class, if you even got that far in history class.
Exactly.
To be able to do it this way. So
there was an OLLI, Osher Lifelong Learning Institute program at Bradley University earlier this month, and about Peoria Reads, Warriors Don't Cry, the civil rights movement. And in doing research for that, you know, there's so much that I never read before, or, you know, I had heard of Emmett Till, but hadn't really read deeply into the history of what happened to him and how, you know, that was just a couple of years before Little Rock, and about all of the other educated black people who tried to get into a university. You know, they already had, you know, they might have been valedictorian of their high school class, they got a bachelor's degree, they had a master's degree, they wanted to get their PhD, but no, we can't admit you. Or, you know, in the case of this person, and his name was G.W. McLaurin. He was 61 years old, had, you know, bachelor's, master's, everything. He wanted to get his doctorate in education. And I think that was at the University of Oklahoma, but he was, they wouldn't admit him. And he fought that, you know, took it through court, and it was decided that, that he could attend, but kind of a separate but equal. His desk was out in the hall. There's, you know, a photo that you will see all over Google Images of all the white kids' desks in the classroom, and he's got a different kind of desk out in the hallway. And it was the same for him throughout the university. He had a certain restroom he could go to. He had a certain table in the cafeteria by himself. He had a certain table in the library by himself.
So, but he went through all that and put up with all that, and then what did he do with his education?
Boy, if you can tell me, I'd really appreciate it. Because everywhere you look about him, you read about the court case.
Yeah,
you read that he was admitted, but you don't know if he did get his PhD, if something happened to him. But I have a feeling that something bad did not happen to him, because there was another man whose last name I believe, I'm not going to say because it might be his middle name I'm thinking of, but he was trying to get into another university to get a law degree. And he went through a struggle, went through the courts, was finally admitted, and shortly after that he disappeared. He went out to buy stamps, and that's the last anybody heard from him, presumably killed. So
there was a lot of that went on. A lot. People just couldn't even live their lives unless they, did these very subservient assigned roles and never made a peep. And how far we've come. It was. I mean, slavery still exists today, but the sort of slavery that existed in this country reached a new peak and was more horrible than anything the world has probably ever seen. And so it's taken a long time. It's been a slow process, but you finally reach critical mass, and you have to hope that things finally are better.
And people take steps, whether it's the Little Rock Nine, to be very brave and walk into Little Rock High School, or whether it's Rosa Parks, who kept her seat on the bus and was thinking at the time, because it was just a year after Emmett Till, who thought, I can't let this go any further, and she kept her seat, and it just all of these events kept building, and it's just amazing the people who were against it, who were against the ruling in Brown versus the Board of Education, who thought, they don't want the black kids going to their white schools because that will just lead to interracial marriage. And so they did whatever they could to stop it, and very, very violent times.
Horrible. And of course, I know a great deal about the abolitionists in that era, which I'm excited that we're going to show the film, The Abolitionists, which is actually a PBS series and beautifully done, and fascinating to watch. You'd think it's fiction, but it's all true. And what a learning curve that is too. But the people all over the country who stood up and said, no, this is wrong, particularly, like the Quakers, people like John Brown that, were killed. Just all the different schemes and different ways people went about it, and everything from literature to music to, I think a lot of people probably don't know that much about the Civil War and don't realize that, like South Carolina tried to secede from the Union in the 1830s. But there was a lot of other things that went on in the meantime that, keep distracting you from the main point, things like, the Mexican-American War, and which a lot of people confuse with the Spanish-American War, but we have books on both at the library. You can read about them. But, the whole country stops to fight this war with Mexico. That kind of takes your eye off the issue of slavery, because you're adding all this, you're adding Texas and California, and you've got people down there, doing a whole other thing. So it all gets delayed. Texas becomes a country and then joins our country, but they have slaves, which, just very convoluted, so many people. It takes a long time to move forward, but this exhibit shows the pivotal moments and what happened. And we have these great brochures that we'll have available for people too, that are being provided, that give a lot of the history and that people can pick up. But they talk about freedom, it's never given, it's won. And this exhibit and this brochure both talk about those pivotal moments.
And there were, shortly after 1863 and after the end of the Civil War, there were 3 amendments to the Constitution that were passed in a very short amount of time, within 5 years. And the 12th Amendment was passed in 1904, but then these 3 amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, were all from 1865 to 70. So it was 60 years since we had a change to the Constitution, and then 3 came, very quickly. The first one, the 13th, was the abolition of slavery, and then that was the one that Illinois was the first to ratify. The 14th was civil rights, granting citizenship to former slaves, and then the 15th was the right to vote. The right of citizens to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. course, it would be not until, what, the 1920s
that women
gender
yeah,
was,
that gender
added
was added to that, but at that point, men could vote.
And the next day, after, I think this was passed in 1870, the day after the 15th Amendment, the right to vote was adopted, Thomas Peterson Mundy of Perth Amboy, New Jersey, became the first African American to vote under the authority of the 15th Amendment.
Wow.
So those three were all
Monumental.
monumental civil rights amendments that happened just after.
And it's interesting that they broke them down into pieces, because I have a feeling if they had all been one big thing, they never would have gotten them through and gotten them ratified. But having them as separate pieces, we're only got like 1 minute left here, so I think we should remind people that this exhibit will be up on January 27th at Main Library on the main floor. It's free. We're open Monday through Saturday from 9 to 6. We can arrange tour groups.
Yes.
We can call and we can have a special presentation. We're going to have a lot more information coming out about dates and times of programs that will go along with this and enhance your learning of it. But we also have Peoria Reads, and there's plenty of events at peoriareads.com. PeoriaPublicLibrary.org has a calendar of events, and that's the best place to find out. Then we'll have our film program, and in June we'll have the Lincoln program. So that's it, isn't it?
Always something to do at Peoria Public Library.
There is, and plenty of books and movies to go with all of these things to learn more about our world and how we got to where we are today and what we can keep doing to make it better, I think.
For everyone.
For everyone, yeah. Well, be sure and visit those two websites, PeoriaPublicLibrary.org and PeoriaReads.com, and you can see all the events that are going on. They're free. There's something for everybody, no matter where you're at in your understanding of these pivotal events in American history. But we certainly hope you'll join us and take advantage of the opportunity to see this exhibit in February. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week on Information Please.